Welcome to part 3 of the tutorial on mastering working with objects in CorelDRAW. In this tutorial, we will learn about creating objects from enclosed areas and applying fills to areas, creating a boundary around selected objects, and using object coordinates to draw and modify objects. Before we dive into creating objects from enclosed areas, I want to talk about how you would go about setting a default fill color, as well as the default outline width, the outline color, and the outline style. The document default setting for outline width is 0.176 mm. Outline color is black. Line style is solid, and fill option is no fill. So, with these default settings, if I drew a line, its width would be 0.176 mm. It will be black in color, and it would be a solid line. And in case of a rectangle, a square, etc., apart from the outline having the same properties, there would be no fill color either. As you can see, the line through this rectangle's fill area. To change these default settings, without selecting any object, click on the icon for outline from the Object Properties docker. Then, click to open the drop-down menu for outline width and make your selection. I am selecting 1 mm as my choice. Doing so brings up the Change Document Defaults window. Here, I can choose the options that I wish to apply these changes to. I can make my 1 mm selection as the default value for any object I create using the Artistic Media tool, or for the text I create using the Artistic Text tool, etc. For this example, I will leave the check mark against Graphic, and not make any other selections. I'll click OK to accept the changes. To change the default outline color, I'll click to open the drop-down menu for outline color. Here, I will choose a color as my default color. I will select a darker green color. Once again, the Change Document Defaults window pops up. I will leave the check mark next to Graphic. Without making any changes, I will click OK to set my new default outline color. I will not make any changes to the line style option. To change the default fill color, I will click on this icon for fill, to bring forward the property fields. Here, I can choose from uniform fill, or fountain fill, or vector pattern fill, etc., to set my fill color default. I will click to select vector pattern fill. And from the Change Document Defaults window, I will keep the check mark next to Graphic, and without making any further changes, I will click OK to confirm my choice. I will click on the black triangle from the Fill Picker window, to open the submenu. In my case, under the Personal category, I will click to select a fill pattern. You can pick a category of your choice. Now, I will choose the Pen tool and draw a straight line. I will click and select the Rectangle tool and draw a rectangle. For both these objects, the outline width, outline color, and the line style are exactly as I selected. And the fill color for the rectangle is also as I specified. You can create objects from areas that are enclosed by 2 or more objects. You can create an object in the shape of the enclosed area. The surrounding shapes and lines are ignored when doing so. For example, here I have a couple of spirals overlapping each other. I am able to create an object out of every area that is completely enclosed by the lines crossing over each other. To create these objects, we will use the Smart Fill tool from the toolbox bar. This icon is for the Smart Fill tool. The Smart Fill tool is unique, because unlike other fill tools, it can detect the edges of an area. Because the Smart Fill tool creates a closed path around the area, it basically creates a new object that can be filled, moved, copied, or edited. Thus, there are 2 ways to use this tool: to fill an area, or to create a new object from an area. Click on the Smart Fill icon to enable it. Up in the Properties bar, you will see the Properties fields associated with the Smart Fill tool. Here you can select your fill options for the object you are about to create. First, In the Fill Options field, click on this black triangle to open the drop-down menu. Here, you can choose if you wish to use the default fill color, or if you wish to specify a color, or you wish the object to have no fill color. Then, from the Fill Color drop-down menu, you can choose a fill color. Next, you have the exact same options for the outline of your objects. You can choose between Default, Specify, and No Outline. You can select the outline width and its color. With the Smart Fill tool selected, click to open the Fill Options drop-down menu. Click on Specify to be able to pick a color of your choice. Then, from the Fill Color drop-down menu, click to select a color of your choice. Next, from the Outline drop-down menu, click on No Outline to create objects without an outline. Then I will hover my cursor over an enclosed area and left-click once to fill that enclosed area, and create an object. I will repeat that to create another object. Then, I will open the drop-down menu for Fill Color and make another selection. I will hover my mouse over a few more areas, and create more objects with the selected color. I will repeat the color selection and color filling in closed areas a few more times. Then, for the last remaining enclosed space, I'll select my fill color. Then, I will click to open the Outline drop-down menu, and click on Specify to select it. From the Outline Width drop-down menu, I will click and select 1.5 mm for my outline width. From the Outline Color drop-down, I will select a color of my choice. I will hover the mouse over that last remaining enclosed area and left-click once to create the final object. Now, I am able to grab any object and move it to another point without affecting the other objects, or the two initial spirals. I can draw a marquee around these newly created objects, and move them to a different point on the canvas, leaving the two initial spirals in their original position, unchanged. Here I have a few six-sided polygons put together to form this shape. I will separate them just to show you the individual polygons. I will switch to the Smart Fill tool, and from the Outline Options drop-down menu, I will click to select No Outline. From the Fill Colors drop-down menu, I will choose a color, and will click in a couple of the enclosed areas to create individual objects that are the shape of those enclosed areas. I will repeat these steps until I have all the enclosed areas colored. Thus creating new objects for each enclosed area. Once completed, I can grab any individual object and move it to a different spot. I can alter the properties of the object, without impacting the other newly created objects, or the initial six-sided polygons. I can select any of these newly created objects, or more than one object, and change their properties. I will select a couple of these objects, and, from the Object Properties docker, I will click on the icon for fill. Then, from the Vector Pattern drop-down menu, I will choose a pattern to alter the look of the selected objects. What happens if with the Smart Fill tool selected, I click on an area outside the overlapping objects. I will change both the fill options and the outline to specify. I will choose a fill color. Then, I will enter 1 mm as the outline width, and select a color for the outline. Then, I will left-click once outside the enclosed area. A new object is created in the shape of all the objects on this page put together, with the specified fill color and the specified outline properties. Let us change the selection for fill as well as outline options to use default. And left-click once outside the enclosed area. A new object is created from all the objects on this page put together, with the document default properties that we set for the object outline width and color, as well as fill, at the beginning of this tutorial. Objects can overlap each other. In this example, the new objects we created using the Smart Fill tool have their object edges overlapping. If you look at the green object in the top left of the enclosed area, you will notice that the outline for this object shows only on 3 sides. The 4th side sits below objects that are along that side. We can change the order in which these objects sit over each other, and bring this green object to the front. There are 3 ways to do this. Select the object and 1. From the menu bar, click on Object to open the drop-down menu. Scroll down and hover the mouse over Order. And from the sub-menu, click on to Front of Page. Or 2. Right-click on the object, and from the pop-up menu, hover over Order, and from the sub-menu, click on to Front of Page. Or 3. Press the Control key, plus the Home key on the keyboard. Similarly, I will click to select this object with the olive fountain fill and a red outline. The order that it is in shows the outline on all its 3 sides. That is because it is currently sitting in front of the surrounding objects. To move it behind the surrounding objects. 1. From the menu bar, click on Object to open the drop-down menu. Scroll down and hover the mouse over Order. And from the sub-menu, click on to Back of Page. Or 2. Right-click on the object, and from the pop-up menu, hover over Order, and from the sub-menu, click on to Back of Page. Or 3. Press the Control key, plus the N key on the keyboard. You can also create a boundary around 2 or more objects, thus creating a new object. But first I will change the default properties for outline. I will click on the outline icon from the Object Properties Docker, and change the outline width to 1.5 mm. Ensure there is a check mark next to Graphic in the Change Document Defaults window, and click OK. Then, from the Fill tab under the Object Properties Docker, I will click on the No Fill icon to set that as the default setting. Leave the check mark next to Graphic, and click OK. Here I have 3 individual ellipses. I will marquee and select all of them. Then, click on Object from the menu bar. Scroll down the drop-down menu and hover over Shaping, and from the sub-menu, I will click on Boundary, to create a new object in the shape of the selected objects. Then, I will left-click and hold on the object, and move it to a different position on the canvas. Or, I will marquee and select the 3 objects again, and from the Properties bar, click on this icon for Boundary, to create a new object by creating a boundary around the selected objects. I will left-click and hold on the object, and move it to a different position on the canvas. Now, I can alter the properties of this newly created object. I will first change the color of the object's outline. Then, I will switch over to the fill properties and apply a fountain fill to this object. I will click on this icon to make it an elliptical fountain fill. I will click on the color marker on the left end and make a color selection. I will repeat the same for the color marker on the right end. I will move the node position to 60%. And change the vertical offset to -16%. I will make a couple of additions to complete what I had in mind. You can draw objects using object coordinates. You can also modify existing objects using object coordinates. You can draw and modify shapes and lines with precision by utilizing the object coordinate stalker. To access the object coordinate stalker, click on Window, then scroll down the drop-down menu and hover over Dockers. From the sub-menu, click on Object Coordinates to launch and open the Object Coordinate Stalker in the Dockers panel. Let us start by drawing a rectangle. I will click on the black triangle in the bottom right corner of the icon for rectangle, to open the drop-down menu, and click on Rectangle. Then I will select the anchor point for this intended rectangle. I will choose my anchor point from these 9 options in the origin group. From this set of 9 options, I will click on this icon for upper left in the top left corner. You will see the blue outline of a rectangle on the page, with a blue square in the upper left corner, indicating the location of the anchor point. I will place my cursor in the X field and type in a value for the precise point I'd like the anchor point to be along the X-axis. I will enter the value of 1 inch in this field. Then, to define the precise position for the anchor point along the Y-axis, I will enter a value of 6 inches in the Y field, and press Tab. You will notice the blue outline shift and place the anchor point at the 1 inch mark along the X-axis, and at the 6 inch mark on the Y-axis. I will make sure there is no checkmark next to proportional, and will enter a value of 2 inches for the width, and 4 inches as the height of the rectangle, and press Tab. I will enter a value of 25 degrees in the angle of rotation field, and press Tab. Then I will click on the button Create Object, to create a rectangle with the required dimensions. Next, I will place my cursor in the angle of rotation field and change the value to 0 degrees, and press Tab. The blue outline indicates the new position of the object. Then, instead of clicking the Create Object button, I will click on the Replace Object button. I am going to change the anchor point to the center by clicking on this icon in the center of the origin group. I want the anchor point to sit at the 5 inch mark along the X-axis, and at the 4 inch mark along the Y-axis. So, I will enter a value of 5 inches in the X field, and 4 inches in the Y field, and press Tab. You will notice the blue outline for our rectangle appears at the specified point on the page. I will leave all other values unchanged and click Create Object, to create the new rectangle. Let us try one more. From the origin group, I will click on this icon for lower center, to place the object's anchor point at the specified position. Then, I will enter 8 inches as my X value to place the anchor at the 8 inch mark along the X-axis, and 2 inches as the Y value, and press Tab. You will see the blue outline of the rectangle show on the page, showing a big blue square at the 8 inch mark along the X-axis, and 2 inch mark along the Y-axis. Once again, I will leave all the other values unchanged, and press the Create Object button to complete the creation of this object. To draw a square, I will start by clicking on the black triangle at the bottom right corner of the rectangle icon. Then from the drop-down menu, click on Square. You will see a blue outline of a square appear on the page. For this example, to place the anchor point in the middle of the right side of the object, I will click on this icon for middle right. The blue outline of a square appears on the page, showing the anchor point in the middle of the right side of the square. I will enter 3.5 inches as my X value, and 6.5 inches as my Y value, and press Tab to move the blue outline to the specified position, placing the anchor point at the 3.5 inch mark along the X-axis, and 6.5 inch mark along the Y-axis. Then, in the Object Size field, I will enter a value of 3 inches. Press Tab and click on the Create Object button to complete the creation of this square object, placed precisely at the specified position on the page. I will set the anchor point at the lower left corner of the bounding box by clicking on this icon for lower left. So, if we were to rotate this object, it will rotate while anchored to the lower left corner. In the Angle of Rotation field, I will enter -20 degrees, and press Tab. The blue outline shows the placing of the object. At this point, I can click on Replace Object, and replace the initial object with the modified object. Or, I can click on Create Object to add an additional object to the page, at the specified position. You can also draw an object by specifying the lower left and upper left corners of the object. Using the bounding box section, X1 and Y1 will place the lower left corner, and X2 and Y2 will place the upper right corner. I will enter 7 inches as my X1 value, and 5 inches as my Y1 value. Then I will move the cursor to the X2 field and enter a value of 10 inches, and 8 inches as my Y2 value, and press Tab. Click Create Object to create the object precisely at the specified position. You can interactively place the origin point on the page. From the origin group, I will set my anchor point to upper left. Next, I will click on this icon for Set Origin Point interactively. When I move my cursor to the page, a blue outline appears that floats with the cursor. I will left-click once to place the outline at the specified anchor point, and enter 4 inches as the width of the object, and 2 inches as the height. Press Tab, and then click on Create Object. I will set the anchor point to upper right in the origin group. Now, from the bounding box section, I will click on this icon for Set Lower Left Corner interactively. When I move my cursor to the page, a blue outline appears that expands, or shrinks, with the cursor movement. When I get to the point where I wish to place the lower left corner of this object, I will left-click once, and then click on Create Object. Now, I will set the anchor point to top right in the origin group. A blue outline for the object appears on the page, with a blue square in the top right corner of the outline. To set the width of the object interactively, click on this icon for Set Dimensions interactively. Left-click and hold on the anchor point, and move your mouse to adjust the width of the object. Release the mouse button when you get the desired width for the object. Press Create Object. Similarly, to set the height of the object interactively, click on this icon for Set Dimensions interactively. Left-click and hold on the anchor point, and move your mouse to adjust the height of the object. Release the mouse button when you get the desired height for the object, and then, this time I'll click on Replace Object. Now, click on this icon to move the anchor point to the lower left of the outline. This icon is to Set Angle interactively. Click on it to enable it. Left-click and hold on a corner of the object, and move the mouse to change the angle of rotation. The rotation will take place around the anchor point. Release the mouse button and then click on Create Object to add another object to the page. To draw an ellipse, open the drop-down menu under the ellipse icon, and click on Ellipse. The blue outline shows where the ellipse will be placed. I will click on this icon for upper left to set the anchor point. You can reposition the outline by changing the values in the X and Y fields. I will enter 1 inch as my X value, and 8 inches as my Y value, and press Tab. Now I will enter 6 inches for the width of the ellipse, and 2 inches as its height, and press Tab. Then I will click on Create Object to create the ellipse. Let's draw a circle. From the drop-down menu under Ellipse, I will click on Circle. If I need to move and reposition the blue outline of the circle, I will left-click once on this icon for Set Origin Point interactively. Now I will move the mouse to reposition the circle on the page, and left-click once. Next, for the diameter of the circle, in the Object Size field, I will enter the value as 4 inches, and press Tab. Click Create Object. Had I clicked on Replace Object, instead of Create Object, the ellipse would be replaced by this circle. There are two types of polygons. Simply polygons, and regular polygons. To size the polygon, we can specify the diameter of the bounding ellipse that can be drawn around the polygon. The center of the bounding ellipse is known as the polygon center. It is this point that is set as the center of rotation. We can draw a polygon by specifying the number of points, or sides. A regular polygon is one with all its sides being equal. We can specify the length of its sides and the angle of rotation. We can specify the center, and the diameter of the bounding circle that can be drawn around the regular polygon. Open the drop-down menu under the polygon icon, and click on Polygon. Then in the Points or Sides field, I will enter the value of 6 to draw a 6-sided polygon. Press Tab for the 6-sided blue outline for the polygon to appear on the canvas. Adjust the X and Y values if you wish to place the polygon at a different point on the canvas. I will enter 3.5 inches for my X value, 5.5 inches as my Y value. Then in the Object Size fields, I will enter 4 inches as the width of the polygon, and 2 inches as its height. Note that the bounding box around the outline of the polygon is an ellipse. Press Tab, and click the Create Object button. Now, I will open the drop-down menu under the polygon icon, and click on Regular Polygon. Then in the Points or Sides field, I will enter the value of 5 to draw a 5-sided polygon. Press Tab for the blue outline for the 5-sided polygon to appear on the canvas. In the Side Length field, I will enter the value of 2 inches, and press Tab. In the Angle of Rotation field, I will enter the value of 180 degrees, and press Tab to rotate the polygon with the point facing up, as shown by the blue outline. Adjust the X and Y values if you wish to place the polygon at a different point on the canvas. I will enter 7.5 inches as my X value, and 3 inches as my Y value, and press Tab. Note that the bounding box around the outline of the polygon is a circle. Click on the Create Object button. Of course, if I click on Replace Object instead of Create Object, the 6-sided polygon would be replaced by the 5-sided regular polygon. Just as with drawing a rectangle, or a square, using object coordinates, we can use any of these icons to interactively change the angle of rotation, the center, or the dimensions of the polygon. To draw a star using object coordinates, open the drop-down menu under the polygon icon, and click on Star to select it. Then, in the Points or Sides field, I will enter the value of 6, and press Tab. And in the Sharpness field, I will enter 53, and press Tab. I will place a check mark next to Proportional, and in the Object Size field, I will enter 4 inches for the width, and press Tab a couple of times. If I need to reposition this object, I will click on this icon for Set Polygon Center interactively, and move the object. Left-click once to place it at a different spot on the canvas. Click on Create Object. Similarly, to draw a complex star using object coordinates, click on Complex Star from the drop-down menu under the polygon icon. In the Points or Sides field, I will enter the value of 8, and press Tab. For sharpness I will change the value to 2, and press Tab. I will leave all other values unchanged. Then, using the Set Polygon Center interactively, I'll move the object and left-click once to place it at a different spot on the canvas. Click on Create Object. Let us draw a straight line. From the Object Coordinate Stalker, click on this icon for the 2-point line. x1 and y1 are the coordinates for the start point of the line, and x2 and y2 are the coordinates for the end point. I will place my cursor in the x1 field and type 3 inches, and 6 inches as my y1 value. Press Tab a couple of times to move the cursor to the x2 field. I will enter 6 inches as my x2 value. I want to draw a perfectly horizontal line, so the y value will remain unchanged. I will enter 6 inches as my y2 value, and press Tab. The blue outline shows us the placing of this line, and the object size field shows that length of the line is 3 inches. I will leave the angle of rotation unchanged at 0. Click Create Object. With this object selected, I will click on the icon for Set Point interactively for x1 and y1. My cursor now has a blue outline attached to it. I will move the mouse and left-click once at the desired spot. I now have two options to choose from. If I click on Create Object, I will have a new object created and placed at the point I selected. Or, if I click on Replace Object, my initial object will vanish, and it will be replaced by the new object placed at the point I selected. For this example, I will click on Replace Object. I will left-click once on a blank spot on the canvas to deselect all objects. Now when I click on the icon for Set Point interactively, for x1 and y1, my cursor has a blue outline attached to it. I will move the mouse and left-click once at the desired spot. This time I have only one option to choose from. The only button available to me is Create Object. This is because we did not have any objects selected when we started this step. I'll click Create Object. Same logic applies to the Set Point interactively, for x2 and y2. Similarly, with this straight line selected, if I click on the Set Line Length interactively icon, and draw a line, the start point of this line will automatically lie on top of the start point of our initial line. I will move the mouse to the point where I wish to place the endpoint, and release the mouse button. I now have two options to choose from: Create Object, and Replace Object. For this example, I will choose Replace Object. Had I completed the same steps without selecting the initial object, the only option that would have been available to me would have been Create Object. I can also draw a two-point line by simply adding the angle for the line, in the angle of rotation field. I will enter 30 degrees. And change the y1 value to 1 inch, to move the starting point of the line down, along the y-axis. I will leave all other values unchanged, and click on Create Object. Had I completed these same steps after selecting an object, I would get the two options to choose from: Create Object, and Replace Object. Finally, let us have a look at drawing a complex line using multiple points. From the Object Coordinate Stalker, click on this icon for Multipoint Line to select it. You will see this window appear below with a column for the x values, and a column for the y values for all the points on our complex line. From the bottom of the Docker, click on this green icon for Add Point. This will add x and y fields for us to specify the coordinates of our first point on this line. I will enter 1 inch for x and 3 inches for y, and press Tab to place the first point at these coordinates. Next, I will click on the Add Point button to add another point. Here I will enter 2 inches as the x value, and 5 inches as the y value, and press Tab to place the next point at these coordinates. Click on the Add Point button again, and for the x value I will enter 3.5 inches, and 1.5 inches as the y value, and press Tab. Click on the Add Point button to add another point. Here I will enter 4 inches as the x value, and 6 inches as the y value. Press Tab to place the next point at these coordinates. Again, click on the Add Point button again, and enter 4.5 inches as the x value, and 2.5 inches for the y value. Press Tab. Next, click on the Add Point button to add another point. Here I will enter 6 inches as the x value, and 6 inches as the y value. Press Tab to place the next point at these coordinates. And one more time, click on the Add Point button again, and enter 7 inches as the X value, and 3 inches for the Y value. Press Tab, and then click on Create Object. If I want to adjust any point on this multi-point line, I will select it by placing my cursor in the X and Y fields for that point, and change their values. I am going to change the values for point number 3 on my multi-point line. I will change the X value to 3 inches, and the Y value to 1 inch, and press Tab. Then I will click on Replace Object. Similarly, if I wanted to add another point to this multi-point line, I would select the line and click on Add Point, to add the coordinates for the new point on this line. I will enter 8.5 inches as the X value, and 4.5 inches as the Y value. Press Tab to place the new point, and then click on Replace Object. To delete a point on this multi-point line, select the point you wish to delete. I will select the second to last point. And then click on this icon for Delete Point, and click on Replace Object. Of course, if I wish to connect the start point to the end point of this line, I would click on this icon for Close Curve, and then click on Replace Object. That brings us to the end of part 3 of the tutorial on mastering working with objects in CorelDRAW. Please take your time exploring objects, and get familiar with all its features and capabilities. Next, we will learn about copying object properties, transformations, and effects. And we will learn about cloning objects. To learn about these tools, please access the Mastering Working with Objects in CorelDRAW, Part 4 tutorial. Or, click on the link provided below, in the description of this video. To access the previously published tutorials, please click on the links provided below for those tutorials, in the description of this video.